Well, thank you for staying with us. The global manufacturing sector has demonstrated continued strength in 2022, building on the momentum it gained emerging from the pandemic and surpassing expectations from the prior 2 years. While overall demand and production capacity have hit recent high, there are indications that near-term outlook may not be as bright. The industry is currently experiencing concerns related to inflation and economic uncertainty. Moreover, supply chain issues, including sourcing bottlenecks, global logistics backlog, cost pressures, and cyber attacks will likely remain critical challenges in the year 2022. Well, let's discuss this projected decline in the sector. And of course, issues around the cash withdrawal limits. That's the big one. I'm starting on that note, and I'm being joined by the Director, Research and Strategy, Chapel Hill, Denham, Mr. Tajuddin Ibrahim. Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you. It's good to see you.
Happy New Year to you too. It's good to see you too.
Thank you so much. Yes, the initiative or it starts today. That's the directive by the Apex Bank, the Central Bank of Nigeria, particularly to the amount for individuals and corporates. It's a big one, but let's start with your overview with the Naira redesign and all of the issues that have popped up from this. I know you've been following the news on availability of this new notes, and a lot of questions are begging for answers. What is your take with regards to this?
I think the first time I spoke on the show, to start with, thank you for having me today. Yeah. I think the first time I spoke on the show about, the matter, I made it known that, the CBN indeed has, a good intention around the redesign of, the Naira notes, talking about the 200, the 500, and the 1,000, notes. But the only concern I expressed, and which I maintain, is around the timing. I think the timing is too short. We are talking about, the deadline being the 31st of this month. I think the timing remains, short. And if there is anything that the CBN can do, my sense is that they should do something to address, the short, timing. But if we take a broader view at it, it is indeed a good policy, and it should allow the CBN to be able to take more control of cash in terms of cash withdrawals by Nigerians generally, and also the utilization of cash for transaction purposes and also for other purposes by individuals. The CBN on the note on the back of this policy will be able, in my view, to account for the currency that is in circulation, talking about cash in this case. So I think it is, broadly speaking, a good policy. The only downside to my mind is around the timing. Yeah.
Around the timing, but some are worried about technological initiatives, of course, online banking and all of that is supposed to come in to make do when we go away from cashless transactions. All of this moves to promote the cashless initiative. But many are worried that we seem not to be there yet, and we want to institute this. Is it not like, which is coming first?
Okay, so maybe we should, take a look at, data as supplied by the Central Bank of Nigeria. If we capture the data available, the starting point is what we call cashless transactions in the country in the year 2022. For the first 11 months of the year, according to the data made available by the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System, NIBS, the data made available showed that Nigeria recorded 318.66 trillion in the value of cashless transactions that were carried out last year for the first 11 months, January to November, of last year. And that number is an indication of 42% increase over the corresponding period of 2021. If you break the number into two, we notice that Nigeria interbank payments, accounted for around 98% of the transactions, and we notice that 2% is attributable to POS terminals in terms of transactions by Nigeria. So, largely speaking, one can say that Nigeria is already embracing cashless, sort of trajectory in terms of transactions. And the new thing that has come is that the government or the CBN really want to be able to take charge in terms of controlling the flow of cash in the economy. As we speak, as of November of last year, 2.6 trillion Naira is the value of cash outside the banking sector. That represents a decline of about 191 million when we, 191 billion when we capture, month-on-month development, relative to the level as at October, which means, Nigerians are already gradually adjusting to the policy by holding less cash and doing more transactions on a cashless basis, using terminals, using POS, using electronic channels, and also using mobile banking, of course. So we have all these, alternative channels there. And my mind tells me that, Nigerians are already, gradually beginning to use them, because of the policy, in my view.
Well, it's worrisome. But before we move on, because I know we have a lot to talk about, and this can take the whole day, what's your concern about those living in the nooks and crannies in all of the villages, the rural areas, about getting to understand that they can key into all of this? Do you think there's enough awareness?
Okay, so let's take a look at numbers again, because numbers do not lie.
Yeah, true.
And they really indeed help us to understand whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. Number one, the question is, how much is the CBN talking about in terms of individual withdrawal limits? They say that from today on, individuals can withdraw up to not more than 500,000 Naira per week. And my mind tells me that, those in the villages, in towns, in, local or rural areas, will be able to tap into this window. 500,000 Naira in my mind, is not what everybody can afford. Not everybody can afford that number. If we look at number again, unique bank verification numbers that we have in the country as we speak is a little above 56 million. If we capture 56 million BVNs and we view them as individual BVNs, we multiply it by 500,000 per week. That will give us about 28 trillion Naira in a week. So we still have that window for people in the rural area. And I think, over time, even they will prefer to migrate to a digital platform where they can use either their mobile devices via USSD, channels, or they will, over time, as internet is available in those areas, will tap into internet opportunities. And I think it's also good for them in terms of safety, in terms of, the risk of armed robbery. All those are positive factors that we should consider. Let us not forget that the CBN recently licensed telecommunication companies to as payment service banks. These companies have presence across major cities and rural areas in Nigeria. They will go there and spring up businesses around payment services using mobile telephone numbers. So I think over time, we will get there. But in the immediate, I think those in the villages or towns are also covered, given the increase, that we have seen in the limit from 100,000 a week to 500,000 a week. And I think individuals should ask themselves, what do I want to use 500,000 Naira cash for in a week? We can do transactions online, in my view.
Well, that sounds good. Let's see how it plays out and the availability of the new currency. But the manufacturing space, there is this projected decline considering what we've seen. And many will say it was expected following what happened, of course, after COVID and Russia and Ukraine crisis, all of the supply disruptions and all of it. But what do you make of the outlook, saying the manufacturing sector might still perform below expectations?
I think we should take a global view at the manufacturing sector. And again, I'm going to speak to data as made available by the United Nations, statistical division. They made us to realize that, when we take a global view at the manufacturing sector, China, the United States of America, and also Japan accounts for 53% of global manufacturing output. What does that tell us? That tells us that if there are issues in China in terms of their ability to source and to source raw materials and manufacture goods and services, the entire world is going to feel the impact. If the US is also having similar challenges, the entire world is going to feel the impact. The third of them is Japan. If Japan is also suffering in sourcing raw materials and also making, and also manufacturing goods, the entire world is also going to feel the impact, because these top three producers globally account for 53% of global manufacturing output. So it is very important, that, the three of them are able to produce and manufacture goods seamlessly. And let us come back to China, what is happening there. Recently, they had issues around, COVID, and they put in place policies that will ensure that they have, zero incidents in terms of, COVID cases. But right now, they have relaxed, those conditions. So that is partly, positive. But when we consider, regions like, Russia, Ukraine, you will probably agree with me that, supply disruptions, will be a major challenge between those two countries and also around countries in that region, for global manufacturers to be able to, number one, source raw materials from those regions. It will be more difficult this year. Number two, to be able to import finished goods from those regions to respective countries will also most likely be difficult, because the tension in that space is not subsiding as we speak. If anything, it is probably getting worse. So those are some of the indicators that points to a somewhat weak outlook for the global manufacturing space in 2023. If we take a look at the US, that's another development for consideration, in my view.
So before I let you go, coming back home now, the question about backward integration is what many is talking about, so that we slightly shift away from this importer dependent sector where we have to import most of our raw materials and all of that. Do you think our manufacturers are keening into this? Manufacturing needs to be domesticated one way or the other.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Manufacturing needs to be domesticated, and that is what is largely speaking lifting the Chinese economy. If we take a look at Nigeria, I believe that backward integration policies are working in some sectors, and I think they can also work in some other sectors of the Nigerian economy. What we need Number one is to ensure that we further tighten, security and ensure that, farmers that go to, their farms to produce some of the agriculture, products that are used as raw materials are safe, and they are able to do their farming and get the output to the users of, those materials. If we have that seamless environment, backward integration is going to really help us. The second element to my mind is around logistics. When these goods are produced in the farms, they will have to be transported to the companies that will use them. Let's talk about, raw sugar, for instance. Let's talk about, wheat, for example. Let us also, consider cocoa, for instance. So we have them grown in this country, and some of them are grown in the large, expected quantity in terms of demand. What we need is to fix security and also fix logistics. Then we will be able to reap more of the benefits of backward integration, in my view.
But I want to find out, what is the global outlook, considering the fears that we might even fall into a recession? I mean, for the manufacturing space now.
For the manufacturing space, I think, that can largely cause economic recession globally. If we put in context, China, for instance, has 30% of their economy, being driven by the manufacturing sector. We have inflation concerns in the US, and we have a global environment where central banks across the globe are, tightening monetary policy rates by raising interest rates, which is in turn not encouraging for consumers to borrow, for companies to borrow. So I think all those are indications that the global economy is probably going to witness a slow growth rate in 2023. And, for those, for the slow growth rate, it may mean recession for some of the advanced economies. My sense is that Nigeria wouldn't go into recession, but our growth rate most likely will be much slower than expected.
I must thank you. So much interesting conversation with you, as usual, Mr. Tajuddin Ibrahim, Director, Research and Strategy, Chapel Hill, Denham. Do have a fruitful and profitable week.